It is not easy to check the condition of the bottom with a ground clearance of 116 to 135 millimeters, depending on tires and the presence of crankcase protection, without a lift. Therefore, when buying, it is useful to visit the nearest dealer for diagnostics. When checking, we carefully examine the corrugation of the exhaust system. It is not difficult to damage it. It is located low, and even without extraneous help, it often burns out. In addition to the auditory rejection of the bubbling exhaust, the leaky corrugation causes engine malfunctions, because the rear oxygen sensor is installed after it. The sensor cannot smell the part of the gases that has gone to the left, therefore it starts to give an incorrect signal to the engine control unit, and that, in turn, goes into emergency mode and ignites the check engine. In this case, the converter is worst of all. After all, the controller, not knowing the true composition of the exhaust, has the right to make a mistake with the quality of the mixture, which is not good for the converter. Therefore, it is more expensive to postpone the replacement of the receiving pipe. The corrugation is welded into it. If you have welding skills, and the pipe itself is not badly damaged, it makes sense to change only the corrugation. You can find a suitable size, 45x205, for 400 rubles. Keep in mind, the warranty on the catalytic converter is less than on the car as a whole, only a year with no mileage limit. We carefully monitored the temperature of the engine. True, after the restyling, its pointer in the dashboard was gone, but instead of it, there are now 2 lamps on the tachometer field, one of which, with a red thermometer, signals overheating. And it can happen due to bursting plastic radiator tanks and, accordingly, the loss of coolant. This happens, according to dealers, from the effects of chemicals that are poured over our roads in winter. When replacing, we recommend finding a more resistant radiator of a new model, which has been going into spare parts since this year. An emergency fuel cutoff valve was installed on parts of the car, designed to work in case of an accident, but it often shuts off the supply during any strong shaking. It is not difficult to return it to its original state. You just need to feel it under the rubber cap and press the cocking button. The valve itself is on the right mudguard. Engine. The 1.4-liter engine, G4EE, is very critical to fuel quality, which sometimes manifests itself during a cold start. The first 15 to 25 seconds of operation, the revolutions walk from 700 to 3000, and in some cases the engine even stalls. When you restart or after the damping of self-oscillations, everything returns to normal, but an unpleasant aftertaste remains. There is nothing wrong with that. It's just that the control unit is honestly trying to meet strict environmental standards, and on our, to put it mildly, mediocre fuel, it does not always succeed. We solved the problem by changing the gas station, or more radically, changing the firmware of the control unit from the basic identifier TFE6I41 to the modified TFE6I42 for Russian realities. They suffer from bad gasoline and candles, requiring the replacement of the previously prescribed 30,000 kilometers, but cases of valves hanging from resins in the fuel on Getz are rare. However, dealers recommend periodically flushing injectors without dismantling to remove carbon deposits from the combustion chambers and wash resins from valve guides and valve stems. Other malfunctions on the motors of the Alpha and Epsilon series are random. There are no objective statistics for the only U-engine diesel in the range. Cars with him were not officially delivered here, and those that ended up in Russia are few. Therefore, taking this option in pursuit of efficiency is not worth it. It's a shame. In the West, according to our information, there are no problems with these motors. Clutch life, as always, is highly dependent on driving style. There are known cases of replacing the driven disc for 15,000 kilometers, but basically the node serves at least 100,000 kilometers. There are almost no problems with the manual gearbox, except that after 120,000 kilometers, the drive oil seals may require replacement. The automatic machine, on the other hand, sometimes suffers from malfunctions, and the installers of radio equipment are considered the culprits, and you won't even think. As you know, Getz is not equipped with it, leaving the consumer to choose the sound to his liking, with which he turns to the masters. Some of them do not bother with careful laying of wires. They are still not visible behind the interior details, and in addition, they cut the factory gasket roots, one of which goes to the overdrive button in the lever. It is worth accidentally tightening the wire, and its compensation loop will decrease, which sooner or later will lead to breaking the wire at the bend. The lever does not stand still. Building wires is a simple matter, but in order to get to the place of repair, you need to dismantle half the cabin. The same bleak procedure awaits when the center console bulbs burn out, baseless 12V, 1.2W. Korean light bulbs fail surprisingly quickly, perhaps not shaking. The main thing when replacing is not to lose or break the 6 gaps for attaching the lining, otherwise you risk breeding the crickets. It happens that the seat heating buttons fail. Such a disease is easy to prevent. Clean the cabin regularly and find another place for a damp umbrella. Also avoid getting the remote control on the driver's door wet, although it is a little more tolerant of water procedures. The suspension of the car is quite tenacious. If breakdowns are avoided, then up to 70 to 80,000 kilometers you cannot even think about repairs. By this time, as a rule, stabilizer bushings are suitable and rear shock absorbers may be asked. Stabilizer struts live for 90,000 kilometers, and silent blocks, front shock absorbers, ball bearings, and steering tips often step over the 100,000th barrier. On a car with a power steering, after 60,000 kilometers, the tip of the pressure line hose sometimes sweats along the rolling. If at the same time there are no noticeable streaks, then you can take your time with the replacement. The front brake pads last an average of 30 to 40,000 kilometers, and the front discs last twice as long as the rear pads. On the part of the car, with a 1.6-liter engine, the rear mechanisms can be disc. Their pads can withstand 50 to 60,000. There are no special problems with the brakes, even cases of warping of discs and wedging of calipers are rare. In general, the car turned out to be successful. We believe that the army of thousands of owners was not disappointed in the choice.